Welcome to this week's IG Live. Today we have a special treat for you because we are going to be talking to an author and a publisher jointly, which, I'm not sure we've actually done before. So it's very exciting. We're going to be talking to author Mike Yam, and you may know him as a children's book author, but most likely you know him as a studio anchor for the NFL Network or perhaps from his TEDx talk. And we are also going to be talking to Kelsea Johnson, who is the co-founder of Stirred Stories, who is going to be publishing Mike Yam's next book. So we're going to have both of them on here today to talk about that project and stories about mixed families. So let me get them both on here for you. Just 1 minute. We do this every week. We are here trying to, hello.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Hi,
Wonderful.
welcome.
I got you guys now. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you. Thank you both for being on here today.
I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, why don't we jump right in, and maybe, I don't know who wants to start. Maybe Mike, if we could start with you.
Sure.
If you could introduce yourself and then tell us how you got into writing children's books.
Yeah, so Mike Yam, and I know you made reference to the work that I do at NFL Network, as well as the CW Sports on the college football and the NFL side. Thrilled to be working with Stirred Stories and Kelsea. The first book that I did was called Fried Rice and Marinara, which was sort of me jumping into the deep end, if I'm being honest with you, because I've told so many stories over the course of my career with just athletes, college athletes, professional athletes. So this is the first time, I was coming up with my own story, and I leaned in on some of my personal experiences to craft that title. But it was really, really exciting. I caught the bug, to be honest with you. It had happened during COVID, where I had some free time and spent just some time thinking about why I chose the career path that I did. And the reality was, if you would have told me as a young boy, or even before I got to college, that I would be a sportscaster, it never really clicked in my head that that was a viable option for me. And I think a lot of it had to do with the lack of visibility for Asian Americans that were in sports, for example. And look, that's just one vertical. And Kelsea, I'm sure, has got a million stories that are really similar with a lot of the authors that she works in. But to me, it was just really important to lend my voice and my sort of background and hopefully inspire a different generation, a younger one.
I love that. Thank you so much. And how about you, Kelsea, if you can introduce yourself and tell us about how you got into publishing?
Yeah, well, first I'll say, Mike, we're so glad you caught the bug because we love working with you. So yeah, I'm Kelsea. I am a native Washingtonian, and I was raised in a family of do-gooders and advocates. So the idea of mobilizing for the sake of uplifting others has really been embedded in my life story from the beginning. In my adult life and my professional life, I initially took this passion for mobilizing for others and took it towards political advocacy. But now, obviously, I'm doing that through publishing marginalized and diverse stories. Stirred Stories began as a coffee shop conversation with my co-founder, who's a friend of mine from college. We had this conversation over coffee a couple years ago, and fast forward to present day, we are 20 books and counting, and when you consider the books we published, our front catalog, and the books we have in production. So it's been lots of fun. It's been a continuation of passions I've had for a lifetime, and I'm excited to keep going.
I love it. I love that path to books coming from political advocacy and being a do-gooder, so to speak. Mike, to go back to you, I'm interested because, you come from this background of journalism, which of course is a lot about words, but writing children's books is a very different craft. Was that a hard transition, or was that something that came naturally for you?
Well, Fried Rice and Marinara is a rhyming book. The next book that I'm working with Kelsea and her team on is also a rhyming book. I wish that I could tell you that I was spending time as a freestyle rapper back in the day, and certainly can come up with rhymes on the fly. That is not what I typically do. So the transition was a little rough. And I've had some other people ask me, like, hey, why a rhyming book? And I do think about how I learned as a kid, and I like music, right? And like the song and the cadence around that. And to me, it becomes more memorable. Obviously, you need to have a great story structure and follow story arc and those types of things. But, the reality was, at a younger age, how do you resonate with that with that audience? To me, I kind of felt like rhyming was the way to go, and was certainly thrilled how the first one has come together. Really excited about how book number two is coming together as well. But you're right, it was definitely a tougher transition for me out of the gate. But I think this process and working with Stirred Stories has kind of opened my eyes on the entire process, because it's vastly different. Fried Rice and Marinara was published by a company called Books, which, and their core competency is really just videos and animation. So it's very, very different. The experience that I've had in the time that I've worked with Stirred Stories is probably a more traditional path in terms of executing a book. And to me, just even working with illustrators and editors, it really has, in my mind, made me a stronger writer.
Right. And um, can you tell us a little bit more? I mean, I think a lot of people are probably already familiar with Fried Rice and Marinara, but maybe you could just give us a little overview and what inspired you to write it.
Yeah, well, Fried Rice and Marinara is the story, for those who haven't been able to check it out either on YouTube or get the hard copy, is the story of a young boy named Mikey, who's about to turn 4, and his mom says to him, what kind of food do you want for your birthday? And Mikey is Chinese and he's Italian, and he feels really stuck because he doesn't know if he's got to pick Chinese food. He doesn't want to disappoint his Italian family. If he picks Italian food, he doesn't want to disappoint his Chinese family. And I grew up in a multicultural household as Chinese. My dad's Chinese, my mom is Italian. And I never really had that dilemma because, let's face it, my mom, we just had both. Like, she just kind of made the call, and that's what it was. But I got to imagine, I sort of tried to take a theme of birthday parties, which every kid absolutely loves. Food to me was the backdrop of everything that we did. And in the process, Mikey goes and he talks to his grandmothers, and his Chinese grandmother says, well, in Hong Kong, we had Chinese food. And his Italian grandmother says, in Italy, we had Italian food. So he feels really stuck. And he nets out, after a conversation with his friend Sophia, that he can just combine them and have both. So he's nervous as, he's making the fried rice and marinara with his mom, are the kids actually going to like this? Because it is different, right? I mean, that's not a normal combination. It's not something that you would generally see at parties. But at the end of the day, spoiler alert, I hate to give away the story, but the kids did love the fried rice and marinara.
I guess so. I would be surprised if we had a book where they didn't say. That's it. So Kelsea, why is it so important to have books like these? I mean, you touched on a little bit, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about why is it so important to have this kind of representation? I know, Mike, you mentioned in the past that this is a book that you never came across when you were a kid and how much that would have meant. Why is it so important to have these kind of books available?
Yeah, I mean, you just reiterated a point that Mike made that touches on why it's so important, right? It's like the idea of visibility. Mike's story, I think, is a testament to why these books are so important. So without repeating that, I'll elaborate. At Stirred Stories, we believe that mainstream media, which includes books, should reflect the diversity of society as a whole, for reasons like Mike's upbringing, for similar reasons that I can relate to as a Black woman who at one point was a young Black girl who went to the bookstore literally every weekend growing up with my mom. That's not an exaggeration. And I loved the books I was introduced to, absolutely. But obviously, in retrospect, I realized that the books that were marketed on YA and middle grade shelves didn't necessarily, in fact, almost never reflected folks who looked like me when it came to the author level, the protagonist level, every stage of the process. So I can also relate to some of the wishing you had seen more nuance in storytelling as you were growing up. So the need to reflect mainstream and diverse stories is not the reality present day in a lot of places in media, but especially in publishing. I'm sure you both know, and a lot of folks who are tuning into this call, that the big 5 publishing houses, so for those who are unfamiliar, it's the 5 publishing houses that control about 80% of the market. They monopolize shelf space, right? So that's not a reality where diversity is prioritized or reflected. The industry overall remains 72% white. Again, not a reality that reflects the diversity of society as a whole. So intent can be there, but execution's not there if these statistics remain true. So these stories really are so important. Books are read at home, books are read in the classroom, and then books become TV shows, plays, movies, right? Books really are a medium that impact conversations we have in society. They contextualize the relationships we have with our family, with our friends, with strangers. They really inform how we show up as people in this world, right? Both for ourselves and both for those around us. So at Search Stories, we believe that it's absolutely imperative that kids have authentic, diverse stories that reflect, again, the reality of modern society, and then also celebrate our differences, because we'll all be better for it.
Can I
Yeah.
just add to that? Is that okay? Because I think
Sure,
Kelsey
yeah.
kind of hits on a really important subject with regard to the types of stories that are out there. Like you can point and say, hey, you know, there are stories for a young Black girl, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
Kelsey can talk about her experiences, or you know, someone who's an Asian male. I also think a lot of the stories that are out there are really narrow
Yep.
in terms of the types of stories that we are talking about. They're really limiting narratives, and to me, it's really disappointing. And I'll give you a great example. You know, it was Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and I go into Barnes and Noble, and I see, you know, a rack of books about Asian children. Great, that's awesome. Love seeing it. But as I go through it, I think there was roughly, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but in the range of 30 books on the rack. Of those 30, 15 of them were written by two authors alone. And then I look at the themes that are there, and most of them are for young Asian girls. I think three had focused in on Asian boys. And the last time I checked, you know, I'm a guy, like I like stories too. Like, you know, like, so what are we doing here? So like, you know, little Asian dudes like cool stories, like let's roll. So I was disappointed with that. But to take it a step further, you know, you're talking about slanty eyes and physical appearance, smelly foods. Like there's more to like the Asian culture than just those verticals, right? And I think when I look at fried rice and marinara, great, it's food as the backdrop. That's 100% accurate. But you know, the reality is it's a story around diversity and centered at a birthday party, which is common for everyone. When I think about the new title that Kelsey and her team are you know, helping me execute on, you know, it's about broadcasting.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, like that doesn't exist. Like there's no story that's actually like that that's out there, and it's really disappointing. And I'm sure Kelsey's got a million stories about those trips to the bookstore. If she thinks back to the titles that were there for an African American community, like I'll tell you what, like when I go to Barnes and Noble, like it's great. Hey, we can talk about Martin Luther King. That's awesome. And Rosa Parks. Like, but there's got to be more stories that are out there than just a few prominent figures in that community. And to me, that's why I'm so excited to be part of Sturge Stories, because they sort of see the big picture here. And it's not just about checking a box and saying, hey, we
Yeah.
got a diverse title. It's about the stories that you're actually telling.
Yeah, no, thank you for adding that, Mike. And to piggyback off of your piggyback, I just want to say too, it's like the idea of celebrating diverse voices, sometimes very, very directly, you know, in a setting we have an anthology called My Culture is Not a Costume, right? And that anthology is very on the money as celebration of different cultures and their nuances, and then very directly an encouragement to uplift cultures without appropriating them. So there is a time and space to be very, I think, direct about, you know, this is a conversation about culture. There also is, as Mike, I think, was getting at, a time and space that we need more time for, to just simply celebrate people being people without making it a story about othering or struggle or strife, right? So one of our initial authors, you know, they initially wrote a book, their grandmother and granddaughter duo, two Black women, and they wrote our inaugural book, The Grocery Game, simply about hanging out as a grandmother and a granddaughter at the grocery store, right? And when they're at the grocery store, they have this wonderful conversation that's kind of a metaphor for everything we're about at Search Stories, about just celebrating diversity and why diversity does make society so great, you know, but they intentionally wrote a story about just a trip they were having, not a story about Black women overcoming some hurdle in life and they're so
Sure.
much better for it, right? It's like, again, time and place to have those conversations, but we also need to see more of the stories, you know, at a bookstore where it's just people who look like Mike and me, people who have lived experiences that aren't the marketed norm, just existing, right? And being happy in their humanity with that reality.
I'm having flashbacks, by the way, to the grocery shopping I used to do with my grandmother, but we can offline about that.
Well, Kelsey, so what do you look for in the books that you're publishing
Yeah,
or publish?
absolutely. So obviously we're committed to authentically elevating marginalized authors and their stories. So first and foremost, we look for alignment with our mission. I mean, our mission is everything to us. So that's where we start first. Is there alignment with our mission. After that, we look for quality that we can work with. The manuscript never needs to be perfect. That's what the editing process is for, right? But are the bones there, you know? And from there, you know, it really is a case by case basis. But those two items, those two criteria are really where we start: mission, and then can we work with this? Do we feel like this is something that we can do justice on, right? Because we also don't want to take on a story that we're not excited about, because we're not going to do that story, that author justice either, right? So that's the short version of our process. Yeah.
And Mike, you know, you've kind of already talked about this a little bit, but what does it mean for you as an author to be able to work with a publisher like Stirred Stories that is so committed, not just to diversity, but I think when I was looking at the mission statement for Stirred Stories, what really jumped out at me is that you're about authentically elevating marginalized voices, which I think is really key. So what does that mean for you as an author?
Yeah, it's been so awesome, you know, the process, and I would imagine that there's some other aspiring authors or current authors that'll watch this video and they know about this process. Like, it is not fun. You're sending emails, it's cold emails, you're getting rejected, the no responses, you'll get a meeting, and then you have that meeting and you go, I don't really know if this is the best fit. You know, and I think at least for me, I was really fortunate to stumble on. There was a story, I think it was in the Washington Times, if I'm not mistaken, Kelsey, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that talked about Stirred Stories and the mission that you guys had. And I just sent a cold email to the team, and, you know, with my manuscript, and just said, hey, like, here's 2 stories that I'm thinking about doing. And, you know, I had some other conversations with some other publishers as well, but there is like this infectious attitude when you talk to Kelsey and members of this team, like they're eating it, they're living it, they're breathing it. And to me, it was really important just to, once again, not work with a group where it's just checking a box, right? Like, there's a real mission around and purpose around the books that they are putting together. And just really thrilled to be a part of the team, and fortunate to be working with these guys.
Yeah, I mean, back at you, Mike. I remember that initial call we had after you read the Post article, and the same way we live and breathe this work,
Sure.
your energy was also infectious. I could tell that it was, you know, not just publishing a book for the sake of checking that milestone off your career list. Like, there was a passion there too. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and thank you for correcting me on the Washington Post too. I don't know why I had to I think I was reading something at the Times today. We've been doing our training camp tour, so sometimes I don't even know what time zone I'm waking up in. But yes, it was the Washington Post. It was a great story on you guys. So
yeah.
Well, so tell us about the project that I don't know, I believe it's not coming out until winter 2025. So I don't know how much you're able to tell us at this point. But...
yeah. Well, we got another editing session later today, so we're in a pretty good place right now. Look, this story, I am so excited about it. I think one of the things that I really wanted to do was lean in on my professional background as a sportscaster as the backdrop of the next story. I felt like I could sort of lean in, and I know a little bit more about some of this stuff than maybe some other subjects. And really, the premise of the story is Mikey and his dad. Mikey's mom says, "Hey, like, we got to clean up this garage," and he doesn't want to do it because, let's face it, you know, the first book was about a party, which all kids love. Cleaning up the garage, not necessarily a ton of fun, but he and his dad go in there, and Mikey finds a karaoke mic, and he gets curious about it, and he falls asleep with the microphone and has a dream that he's a sportscaster and he's interviewing an athlete. And then he wakes up and he's so excited that he now has this new career aspiration, even at a young age. I remember as a kid, you know, I wanted to be a professional basketball player, or, you know, a baseball player, or a policeman. Like, those were the, you know, the things that I thought about as a kid, but it never occurred to me again that I could be a sportscaster, despite the fact that I played every sport. And then I watched God only knows how many hours of games in front of the television, and used to be excited to be able to go to Shea Stadium at the time and watch, you know, the Mets play baseball. You know, so for me, that's sort of the backdrop of the story, and I'm really excited about it. Like, I'm really thrilled. Laura Dong, who did some of the illustrations, or not some, she did the illustrations for Fried Rice and Marinara. She's going to be rolling with us on this one. It's been a tremendous experience, and honestly, like, Kelsey's team, they've been able to kind of rally around the story. It's been awesome.
Well, we look forward to it. So am I right? Is that winter 2025, or when does that come out?
Yeah, as of right now, we're shooting for early next year. There's a little bit of a football theme, so you will see some ties, hopefully, with the postseason in the NFL, and obviously the Super Bowl around the corner.
Well, we look forward to that. Thank you both for taking the time to talk with us today. It was just such a treat. Like I was saying at the beginning, I don't think we've ever done a joint interview with an author and a publisher. It's just so fun to get to see both sides of that.
Oh, yes.
Oh yeah. Luckily, Kelsea didn't have any bad stories about me, so
No.
we'll keep it positive and,
Yeah,
and,
no.
and have some fun with it. But maybe this is the benchmark for
Mhm.
for some future stories and videos that you
Yeah.
guys are doing.
I love it. I love it. This is wonderful. Thank you both for taking the time to talk with us today. And anybody who's joining us late, this is going to be up on our Instagram in just a few minutes, and then we'll have it up on our YouTube channel later. Thank you both for taking the time. It was such a treat to talk with you.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks for
this
having
was
us.
so fun. Thank you so much for having us.
Bye, everybody.